Hey there, today I'm finally going to be weighing in on that British Empire video from Prager University. You can find a link to it in the description. Many people have responded to this video already, and they're all almost entirely right that this video is mostly nonsense. I particularly like this video from Shaun, a scandalized British guy. I'll put a link in the description below. YouTube is now filled with deep dives on specific historic instances that the narrator, Crocker III, gets very wrong. As someone who's spent a couple years studying the British Empire, I want to focus on the video itself and one really glaring problem that it reveals. Crocker III doesn't seem to know much about the British Empire or its legacy. What he presents in this video is a cartoon propaganda version that an elementary school teacher from Britain in the 1800s would be embarrassed by. The video has no appreciation for space or time. It completely ignores the very brutal fact that the British Empire was different things in different places and in different times, and most importantly, to different peoples.
They were under no illusions about making Arabs or Afghans or Zulus into Englishmen. They were more than content to leave people alone, to let them be themselves, to govern them with the lightest possible hand, while respecting and often ruling through local leaders.
This policy of local control was only adopted in the last half-century or so of the British Empire, after they'd swallowed up so much territory that they couldn't physically send out enough administrators. In fact, the First War of Indian Independence in 1857 was sparked in part by the fact that the British Governor-General, Lord Dalhousie, kept stealing land from the various princes he had treaties with. It was only after murderously suppressing that uprising that the British introduced the bribe the local kings approach, though they only introduced it in some places. Because again, there was no consistent policy from country to country, let alone continent to continent or decade to decade. This video consciously squashes centuries of development into a brief just-so story about completely unexamined concepts and heroes. A similar story for the United States would talk about how all U.S. citizens love to take the Pony Express to their technology jobs in Silicon Valley so they can get away from European religious persecution. It's farcical. And the Prager video's greatest hits approach is very conscious. After watching it, you could get the sense that suppressing slavery and widow burning were the British Empire's main activities. If you spend any time at all studying the British Empire, you get very familiar with these two arguments, because they are just about the only unreservedly positive things the British Empire has to show for its 350 sordid years of history. Charles Napier, the hero of the widow-burning controversy Prager dedicates a tenth of the video runtime to, was able to save one woman's life. He was not able to keep the British government from burning the villages of Indians who did not pay their taxes. As Crocker points out,
it was the British Empire, the largest empire the world has ever known.
And all they have to show for it is a little less domestic violence in a select few of the Indian families they were starving to death, and stopping slavery in their own territories after the British Empire had perfected it and outsourced it to the United States and Brazil, exactly like a highly polluting manufacturing industry today. These arguments were both used heavily as the British were pillaging the world, and they should ring just as false today. By the way, while the British were happy to crush the slave trade in the Atlantic and West Africa where it served their power, in East African and Arabian kingdoms that they controlled, they happily let it go on, long after slavery had been ended in the United States. The British did finally crush slavery in Oman with a coup in 1970. This video is from Prager University, a YouTube channel that pushes a stridently right-wing view. Now, I obviously don't have any trouble with pushing a viewpoint on YouTube. Prager University is not a real university, but the MoFreedomFoundation isn't technically a foundation either. What I do have a problem with, however, is ignorance and incoherence, and there is a ton of it in this Prager British Empire video. Alongside a bunch of paint-by-numbers 19th century imperial propaganda, there are a bunch of weird 1990s culture war buzzwords that are completely meaningless in the context of the British Empire.
The British still insisted on certain Judeo-Christian moral standards. They were not, in that respect, multiculturalists. The British did not try to nation build in the way we think of it now.
You see what I mean? That's some very strong, circa 1999 George W. Bush campaign rhetoric that is about as relevant to the British Empire as the Sony PlayStation is. But that last nation-building bit is interesting because it gets to another conflict that Crocker ignores completely. This is the conflict within the British Empire. The British Empire wasn't just a different thing at different points in space and time. There was a ton of conflict between the people running the British Empire. Some people really wanted to educate conquered populations. Some people did not. William Gladstone, the British Prime Minister that launched the scramble for Africa, actually kind of hated empire, and he rightly feared that it would lead to the end of British power. This rosy, confident view of the British Empire that PragerU presents wasn't even held by many of the people running the British Empire at the time. The Prager University video is not an educational one. It is 5 or so minutes of happy chat propaganda, mostly crafted to flatter a handful of old white men who purchased the channel's millions of views. Crocker's one admission that the British Empire might not have been flawless is pretty telling.
Even where the British have merited criticism, as in Ireland, there is more to the imperial story.
There are a lot of proud Irish Americans in conservative circles nowadays, and that's some identity politics Prager has to respect. This whole thing isn't just propaganda, it's really, really predictable propaganda. There are some things that this video does get right. The British Empire was vastly more powerful and influential than is commonly recognized. It was important to the spread of these institutions. And yes, the British Empire was very important in forming our modern ideas of freedom. In that sense, Prager University should be thanked for bringing more attention to the British Empire. Of course, neither Crocker nor Prager seems to have any idea of how that concept of freedom actually worked, but we'll cover that next time in a video that I'm thinking of calling What PragerU Gets Kind of Right About the British Empire. Thanks for watching, please subscribe, and if you're interested in a similarly opinionated but much smarter and more complete picture of the British Empire, you can buy my book, Avoiding the British Empire, available now in paperback and Amazon Kindle form. Thanks.